Bronwyn Eyre is Saskatchewan's Minister of Energy and Resources, and she is in Ottawa, as you can see, and she's joining me to discuss a number of issues of importance to Saskatchewan, including the oil gap and federal energy policies. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in to speak with me. You come to town to talk to federal politicians here about a number of your province's concerns. And let me start with the oil gap and what's happening in oil prices in Western Canada. What's the situation right now in Saskatchewan?
Well, in Saskatchewan, if the current differential were to last for a year, we would have a 500-ish impact on our provincial royalties, between $475 million and $500 million, and a $7 billion impact on the sector. And as we've said, $200 million, $300 million wasn't good, and that was a few months ago. I mean, that's the cost of entire ministries. So it's a major impact, and we take it very seriously.
Why are we seeing the kind of price decline we're seeing? Why are we seeing this gap between, to put it in simple terms, Canadian-produced oil and oil priced in the United States? Why are we seeing this gap?
Well, one major word, pipelines. That's the major explanation. There's some talk about refineries coming back online and how that may tweak things and influence things a little bit. But really, over the last few years, we have seen 2 pipelines killed, a third one in effect nationalized and currently stalled. We just cannot get our product to global markets and to Tidewater.
So in effect, you have this collision of bad circumstances. You've got no way to deliver it, so now you've got a glut of oil building up in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and no way to move it.
Right, and that's why we're seeing the perfect storm, or we're saying it is the perfect storm for the energy sector, because not only do we have the lack of pipelines and the differential that comes about as a result of that, we have the fear over Bill C-69, the fear over the federal carbon tax, and it just represents a very toxic trio for the energy sector, not only in Saskatchewan, but a bill such as Bill C-69 is really bad for the Canadian energy sector.
Let's talk about, again, I want to stay a little bit with the impact on the ground. So how is this, the fallout from this oil gap and the inability to move the oil, how's that being demonstrated in Saskatchewan? Are we seeing projects stopped? Are we seeing companies moving out? Are we seeing companies deciding to move elsewhere?
Well, we are seeing some shutting in, which is tragic because, of course, companies that whose forecasts were looking cautiously optimistic a few months ago are suddenly in a more dangerous position, and you'll have seen the comments in recent days. Some companies, they feel differently about shutting in and asking that of governments. But the point is that if there's any shutting in of oil wells, for example, of course, there's a loss of royalties to provinces, and it is a very drastic measure, it seems to me, and a defeatist measure, because we're not dealing with the main issue at hand, which is the cross-provincial pipeline issue. That's the issue we have to address before we get into other offshoots of what provinces can do. This isn't our problem, our made problem.
Right, I'm just going to ask you that. I mean, for a lot of people watching, this will sound like an Alberta-Saskatchewan problem, but in your view, it's not, is it? I mean, in terms of the hit that's happening to the economies of both provinces, there's a broader national issue here, right?
Absolutely, and the energy sector and, of course, the economy don't operate in silos. And so the problem that we're seeing in Saskatchewan, where we have that massive $500 million impact on royalties if these differentials were to continue for another year, but even at a lower amount, that impacts everything. That impacts social services and schools and highways and hospitals. And it's the same across the country. If we continue to see the capital flight that we're seeing to the U.S., the lack of investment, the discouragement of investment that all of this package together brings about, it's bad for everybody in the country.
What's your message to the federal government?
We've got to get these pipelines built. TMX has simply, or former TMX, now our pipeline, simply has to be put on a clear schedule so that there's transparency and everyone knows when that is going to begin to reduce the crisis that we're seeing in the sector. And again, keep in mind that Energy East and Northern Gateway were approved projects that were ready to go, we wouldn't be in this situation that we're in today had those gone ahead. That's the reality we're facing. We've got to get those pipelines built.
Okay, so given what we see from the federal government, I mean, they're still trying to find a way to get the pipeline all Canadians now own built. Are you seeing enough action from them? I mean, what more should they be doing?
Well, we've got to get shovels in the ground. That was the plan. And certainly Kinder Morgan was ready and willing and able to build that pipeline. And it was all the delays, all the climate of investment uncertainty that surrounded that project that created the situation we're in now. Let's hope that and we are hopeful, that the federal government stepping in on this project will see it through. It has to be seen through. There can't be any more major delays because it's all part and parcel of the broader uncertainty that leads to the differentials for one that we're seeing. And we are starting to see, I think, a certain amount of blowback in the sector where people are becoming more vocal, whether it's fund managers or actual oil companies saying, this can't go on like this. It has to change or it's going to impact Canada's reputation globally.
And you've been here meeting with senators. Let's layer into the conversation now the concerns around Bill C-69, which is the bill that reforms the National Energy Board, the environmental review process for major energy projects. What's your concern there?
Well, Bill C-69 is not about streamlining or making things more competitive. It's about big B bureaucracy. It's about expanding and broadening environmental impact assessments to the point that years will be added onto projects. And the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association said recently that with Bill C-69 in the mix, if it's in the mix, we will not see another major pipeline project built in Canada. That's how serious it is.
And yet people, you know, the argument on the other side is we have an assessment process that hasn't been working because we can't get anything built. So there needs to be something done, but you're saying this isn't it.
Well, I think we should, instead of upending everything, we can work with what we have. I know there are concerns about the previous or current process of regulation and regulatory oversight that we've had to this point. I have cautiously different views than that. I think that we've seen, for example, the Line 3 replacement pipeline in the Enbridge, that has gone through the current process. There were thousands of community engagements for that process, and it was successful. I stood at the latest announcement a few months ago about the next section that's going to be laid down, and First Nations leaders were there. They were saying we were worked with, we were consulted with. This is an example of a project that works. They exist, and I think with respect, the Energy East and Northern Gateway projects were ones we could have worked with further rather than go right back to the beginning with a completely different process that will add years on to project approvals. We
had the Alberta minister come through here a couple of weeks ago with the same message about C-69 and talking to senators. What do you want the senators to do?
Well, I think that if there ever was a time for sober second thought, it's now. They could delay, they could certainly defeat the bill. That's in their power, and I believe that we absolutely, if nothing else, need a second look, a sober second look at this bill. I think hearings across the country would be very helpful, so that we don't miss an opportunity to hear from those communities and the sector that is struggling so much and are struggling so much, to make sure that they impart to the process what this means to the energy sector in the country.
Great. It's great to have the perspective from the government of Saskatchewan. Bronwyn Eyre, the province's Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. Good to speak with you. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you very much.